Sarah had always known life wasn't easy, but lately, it felt like the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. As a single mom, she spent her days juggling work, taking care of her young son, and managing the house. Every moment was a race against time, and every decision came with a price. She loved her little boy more than anything in the world, but sometimes, it seemed like love wasn't enough to make ends meet. Sarah's apartment was small, with creaky floors and walls that were thin enough to hear the neighbors next door fighting at all hours. She had never imagined her life would turn out like this, struggling to make it through each day, counting every penny. When she first became a mom, she had dreams of giving her child the best life possible, but now, she was just trying to survive. And some days, that was harder than others. Her son, Sam, was only 5, but he already understood more than most kids his age. He noticed when his mom didn't smile as much or when she skipped buying something for herself. He would ask, "Why don't you get any candy, Mom?" And Sarah would smile and say, "I'm saving all my money for you, sweetie." He didn't fully understand the struggle, but he could feel it in the way Sarah's shoulders would droop at the end of the day. Today was one of those days. Sarah had to make a quick trip to the grocery store, but she didn't have much money to spend. She grabbed a few basic items: bread, milk, some eggs, and a bag of rice. These were the things that would last them through the week. She couldn't afford anything extra. No treats for Sam, no snacks for herself. Just the basics. As she walked down the aisles of the store, she tried to stick to her list. The store was crowded, and the noise of carts clattering against the floors filled the air. Sam was in a playful mood today, running up and down the aisles, his tiny feet making quick little steps as he pretended to race against her. Sarah smiled at him, but it was a tired smile. She felt the exhaustion in her bones. She knew she couldn't keep going at this pace forever, but for now, she had no choice. When they reached the checkout line, Sarah's heart sank a little. She had saved up some change to pay for their groceries, and it had taken a while to gather it all together. Every time she found a coin, she would add it to her jar, thinking, "This will be enough for the week." But it never seemed to be enough. Today, she counted out every quarter, nickel, and dime, hoping it would cover the total. As Sarah unloaded the groceries onto the conveyor belt, she could already feel the eyes of the people behind her. She wasn't imagining it. She could see the glances, hear the quiet whispers. She had learned to ignore most of it by now. But there was something about today that made her feel even more self-conscious. She felt like everyone in the store was judging her. When the cashier rang up the items, the total flashed on the screen. It was a little more than she had expected, but she told herself it was okay. She had saved just enough. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small bag of coins. She started counting them slowly, trying not to make a scene. Her hands trembled slightly as she dropped each coin onto the counter. Quarters, dimes, and nickels, each one felt like a tiny piece of her dignity slipping away. The cashier's eyes narrowed, and she sighed, clearly annoyed. Sarah could feel her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had paid with coins before, but it always felt awkward. Today, however, it felt like the whole store was watching, waiting for her to finish. Sarah kept her head down, focusing on the coins in front of her. She didn't want to look up, didn't want to see the judgment in their eyes. The people behind her in line shifted impatiently, and she heard one of them mutter, "Seriously? Coins? She can't even afford bills." The words cut through her like a knife. Her heart sank, and for a moment, she felt like she might choke on the lump in her throat. She tried to ignore them. "Stay calm," she told herself. "Just finish this, and get out of here." But the whispers didn't stop. Another person in line snickered, "That's pathetic. Who even pays with coins anymore?" Sarah's hands shook harder now, but she kept counting, kept placing the coins one by one onto the counter. Her son, Sam, didn't understand what was going on. He was busy looking at the candy at the checkout counter, his little face lighting up with excitement. But even he seemed to sense that something was off. He looked up at Sarah and asked, "Are we done, Mom?" Sarah forced a smile. "Almost, sweetie. Just a little more." She couldn't bring herself to look up at the cashier or the people behind her. She was too ashamed. She had never wanted to be the subject of anyone's gossip, but here she was, standing in line with nothing but coins, feeling like the whole world was judging her. She had worked so hard to get here. But in that moment, it felt like all of her struggles, all of her efforts, didn't matter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she finished counting the last coin. The cashier took the money, and Sarah grabbed her bags, feeling a rush of relief. She didn't wait for her change. She just wanted to get out of there. As she walked away, she heard the whispers continue behind her, and it felt like they were following her, echoing in her mind. When they stepped outside, Sarah took a deep breath and tried to shake off the sting of what had just happened. She had done her best. She was doing the best she could for her son. And that was all that mattered. But as they walked to the car, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, did it matter? Did her best really mean anything if others only saw her as someone to shame? The next day, Sarah woke up to the sound of her alarm ringing, followed by the soft rustle of her son, Sam, waking up in his bed. His little voice drifted through the small apartment. "Mom, are we going to the store today?" he asked excitedly. It was clear he didn't even remember the difficult trip to the store yesterday. For him, it was just another adventure with his mom. Sarah rubbed her eyes and sighed softly. She had planned on going to the store today. They were out of a few essentials: milk, eggs, and bread. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to face the embarrassment again. The memory of yesterday's experience hung heavy in her mind like a dark cloud. The whispers, the looks, the way the people in line seemed to judge her every move. It felt like she was carrying that shame with her everywhere. But she had no choice. Sam needed food, and she needed to make sure they had enough to get through the week. So, Sarah pushed the fear aside. She got Sam dressed, put on a brave face, and promised herself that today would be different. She would get in and out of the store without any drama. No one would make her feel small today. As they walked down the street to the store, Sarah tried to focus on the present moment. Sam held her hand tightly, his tiny fingers gripping hers like he knew how important today was. "Mom, I want the red cereal," Sam said, tugging at her sleeve. Sarah smiled, trying to keep things light. "We'll see, buddy. We have to stick to the list today, okay?" Sam nodded, his bright eyes shining with excitement as he skipped ahead. It was hard not to smile at how carefree he was. He didn't see the world the way she did. He didn't understand the struggles she faced every day, the constant worry about money, about their future. He just saw the store as a place full of possibilities. For him, the world was full of wonder, not judgment. When they entered the store, Sarah took a deep breath. The familiar smell of fresh bread and the hum of overhead lights greeted them, but today it felt different. She walked quickly, trying to avoid any attention. The store wasn't as crowded as it had been the day before, but there were still enough people that she could feel their eyes on her. She tried not to let it bother her. She focused on getting the items they needed and keeping Sam entertained while they shopped. As she picked up a carton of milk, she saw the same cashier from yesterday. The woman looked at her briefly but didn't say anything. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. Would she remember me? Sarah wondered. Would she judge me again for paying with coins? She tried to push the thought away, but it lingered. They moved on to the bread aisle, and Sam immediately grabbed a loaf of bread with a huge smile on his face. "Look, Mom. It's the soft bread," he said, holding it up like it was the greatest treasure in the world. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Sam always found joy in the smallest things, and that was something she admired about him. They grabbed a few more items and made their way to the checkout. Sarah felt her heart race as they approached the counter. She was already imagining the whispers, the looks, the judgment. But today, she told herself, today will be different. She would pay with the bills she had saved, not coins. She would keep her dignity intact. But as they reached the front of the line, something unexpected happened. The store was busier now. More people had lined up behind them, and they were all watching. Sarah's palms began to sweat. She quickly placed the items on the counter, trying to avoid looking at the cashier's face. But as she did, she saw the cashier glance at the items, then at her, and then at the line of people waiting behind her. The cashier hesitated for a moment before beginning to scan the items. Sarah noticed the faint smirk on the cashier's face, and it made her stomach churn. She didn't want to think about it. Don't focus on her, Sarah told herself. Just pay and leave. Then, something even worse happened. One of the customers behind her, a woman who looked to be in her mid-30s, cleared her throat loudly. Ugh, do you really have to pay with all that? The woman muttered under her breath. I mean, isn't it embarrassing to not even have enough cash for a real payment? The words hit Sarah like a slap. She wanted to turn around and shout at the woman, to tell her to mind her own business. But she couldn't. Instead, she felt her face go red, and her fingers started to tremble. Sam, who had been standing quietly beside her, looked up at her with wide eyes. Mom? Sam asked, his voice small. What did she say? Sarah's heart twisted. She smiled weakly at her son, trying to keep the tears at bay. It's okay, sweetie. Let's just get through this. But she couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation that had taken hold of her. The woman's words felt like they were echoing in her head. Not even enough cash for a real payment. It wasn't the first time she'd felt like this, like she wasn't enough, like she wasn't doing a good enough job. But today, it hurt more than ever. As the cashier finished ringing up the items, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out the few bills she had left. She quickly handed them over, avoiding the woman behind her's eyes. But the damage was done. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in the store had witnessed her struggle. They had seen the coins, the embarrassment, and now, they saw the hurt in her eyes. She grabbed the bags and hurried out of the store, Sam trailing behind her, oblivious to the scene that had just unfolded. As they stepped outside, the cool air hit Sarah's face, and she breathed a sigh of relief. It's over, she thought. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just about the coins. It was about how the world saw her and how she saw herself. Sarah's steps were heavy as she walked down the street, her mind still stuck on the events from the store. The words of the woman in line echoed in her ears, and the weight of the judgment pressed down on her chest. She had felt it before: the uncomfortable glances, the whispered words, the feeling that everyone could see her flaws. But this time, it was different. This time, the sting of embarrassment was sharper, deeper. She tried to push it aside, telling herself it didn't matter. I'm doing the best I can for Sam, she thought, clenching her jaw. But the more she tried to convince herself, the more the feelings of shame crept in, wrapping themselves around her like a heavy blanket. She couldn't help but wonder if the woman at the store was right. Was it pathetic to pay with coins? Was it really that embarrassing? Sam chattered away beside her, completely oblivious to the tension in the air. Mom, do you think we can get a toy next time? The one with the wheels, he asked, pointing to a toy store as they walked by. Sarah forced a smile and nodded. We'll see, sweetie. Maybe next time. As they reached their apartment building, Sarah could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her. She had always been strong, always told herself that she would be able to handle anything. But now, she wasn't so sure. The world seemed to see her as someone to be looked down on, someone who wasn't good enough. And the more she thought about it, the more it hurt. That night, as she sat on the couch, Sam curled up beside her, watching his favorite cartoon on the small TV in the corner of the room. Sarah absent-mindedly stared at the screen, but her mind was far away. She thought about the look on the cashier's face, the way the woman had sneered at her, the way everyone in line had acted like she didn't belong there. It was as if she was invisible, just a background figure to be judged, ignored, and dismissed. She had always known that life wasn't easy. Being a single mom meant that she didn't have the luxury of taking anything for granted. There were days when she felt like she was barely holding it all together. And now, the one thing she had always tried to protect, her pride, had been stripped away in front of a group of strangers. The thought of it made her stomach turn. "Mom, are you okay?" Sam asked suddenly, turning his head to look at her. His innocent eyes were full of concern, and Sarah's heart clenched. How could I be okay? She thought. How could she explain to her child that the world didn't always treat people kindly, especially people like her? "I'm fine, sweetie," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair out of his face. "Just a little tired, that's all." Sam smiled and snuggled closer to her. "I love you, Mom. You're the best." Sarah smiled back, her heart swelling with love for her son. In that moment, she knew that he didn't see the coins or the judgment. He didn't care how she paid for their food. He only cared that she was there for him, that she loved him, and that she always made sure he was okay. And that, in itself, was enough. But even as she held him, Sarah couldn't shake the feelings of inadequacy. Why did it bother me so much? She asked herself. Why did I let it get to me? She had always been the one to push through the hard times, to find a way when there didn't seem to be one. But now, it felt like the world had caught her in a moment of weakness, and she wasn't sure how to escape it. The next day, Sarah went to work as usual. She tried to focus on her tasks, tried to drown out the voices in her head that kept telling her she wasn't good enough. But it was hard. It felt like every step she took, every decision she made, was being judged. She felt the eyes of her co-workers on her, and though no one said anything, she could sense their silent judgment. It was as if they all knew she wasn't keeping up with the world's expectations. She thought about the woman at the store again. What did she see when she looked at me? Sarah wondered. Did she see a woman doing her best for her child? Or did she just see someone who couldn't even afford to pay with bills? At lunch, Sarah sat alone in the break room, eating the simple sandwich she had packed from home. Her co-workers were chatting and laughing nearby, but Sarah didn't feel like joining them. It was too much effort to pretend that everything was okay. She felt like she didn't belong. Like she wasn't part of the world they lived in. As the day went on, Sarah's thoughts kept drifting back to the same place, the judgment. It was like a dark cloud following her, no matter where she went. She had always tried to ignore the whispers, the stares, but today it felt impossible. It felt like the world had turned its back on her, and all she could do was stand there and take it. When she got home that evening, she found Sam sitting at the table, drawing pictures with crayons. His drawings were always bright and full of color, full of life and energy. He had drawn a picture of their apartment, with both of them standing side by side, smiling. Sarah's heart warmed at the sight. He doesn't care about coins. He doesn't care about any of this, she thought. He just wants to be with me. But even as she stared at his picture, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She couldn't protect him from the world's judgment forever. One day, he would feel it too. One day, he might have to face the same kind of shame that she had. She sighed and hugged Sam tight. "I love you, kiddo," she whispered. I love you too, Mom, he replied, his voice full of warmth and trust. And in that moment, Sarah realized something important. No matter how much the world judged her, no matter how much she felt like she wasn't enough, Sam would always see her as his hero. And for now, that was all that mattered. The next few days passed in a blur. Sarah went to work, ran errands, and took care of Sam, but it felt like she was just going through the motions. Each day was a repeat of the last, and the sting of the store incident still lingered in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the way people looked at her, the way they judged her for using coins instead of bills. Every time she passed by the grocery store, she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She kept telling herself it didn't matter, that she was doing the best she could for Sam, but the doubt kept creeping in. She started to question everything: her choices, her life, the way she was raising her son. Was she really doing enough? Was she good enough? The self-doubt became a constant companion. She would look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back at her. Her once bright eyes were now dull, her shoulders slumped with the weight of responsibilities she didn't know how to carry anymore. She had always been the one to keep going, to push through the tough times. But now, everything felt harder than it ever had before. One night, after Sam had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the bills that piled up in front of her. The numbers on the paper seemed to mock her, reminding her of the gap between what she had and what she needed. There was no way she could pay all of them on time. The thought of getting another late fee made her stomach turn. As she looked at the bills, Sarah's mind wandered back to the store again. She remembered the woman who had mocked her for paying with coins. What did I do wrong? Sarah thought, feeling a lump form in her throat. I didn't choose to be in this situation. I didn't choose to struggle. Why does it feel like I'm being punished for it? She thought about all the times she had worked so hard, stayed up late finishing paperwork, taking on extra shifts at work, skipping meals just to make sure Sam had enough to eat. All of it seemed to go unnoticed. All of it seemed to be for nothing. The world didn't care that she was trying, that she was giving everything she had for her son. It felt like no one saw her, and worse, that no one even cared. Sarah wiped away a tear and stood up, pacing around the small kitchen. She wanted to scream, to tell the world how hard she was trying. She wanted to shout at the cashier, at the woman in line, at everyone who had ever looked down on her. But she knew that would do nothing. It would just make everything worse. Sam's voice cut through her thoughts. Mom, he called from his bedroom. Sarah froze, wiping her eyes quickly. Yeah, buddy, she called back, trying to steady her voice. I can't sleep, Sam said softly. Sarah walked into his room, her heart aching. Sam was sitting up in bed, hugging his favorite stuffed bear. He had a worried look on his face, the kind that Sarah had seen before. He was just 5, but he could tell when something was wrong. She sat down beside him and stroked his hair gently. What's the matter, sweetie? She asked. I'm scared, Sam admitted, his eyes wide. What if we don't have enough money for the food? What if we run out of things and can't buy any more? Sarah felt a rush of emotions: love for her son, guilt for not being able to give him everything he needed, and the deep fear that one day, he would be hungry because she couldn't provide. She hugged him tightly, trying to hide her own tears. Don't worry, Sam. I'll make sure we have everything we need. You're safe. I'll always take care of you. Sam snuggled closer to her, resting his head on her shoulder. You're the best, Mom. You always take care of me. The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. Here she was, feeling like she wasn't good enough, and yet her little boy thought she was the best. He didn't care about coins or bills. He didn't care about any of the things that made her feel small. He just cared about her love and the way she took care of him. Sarah kissed his forehead and whispered, "I love you, Sam. More than anything in the world." "I love you too, Mom," he replied, his voice full of trust and warmth. As Sarah sat there, holding her son, a new realization began to form in her mind. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to worry about what the world thought of her or whether she was doing things right. What mattered was that she loved Sam, and she was doing everything she could to take care of him. No amount of judgment or shame could change that. The next day, Sarah woke up with a new sense of determination. She was still scared, still uncertain about the future, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. She wasn't going to let the whispers or the stares keep her down. She was a mother, and that was all that mattered. No one could take that away from her. She took a deep breath as she got ready for work, reminding herself that she was enough. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to have everything figured out. She just needed to keep going, one step at a time, for herself and for Sam. When she picked Sam up from daycare later that day, she felt a quiet strength inside her. She had faced so much already, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew she could handle it. She would face the judgment and the shame, but she wouldn't let it define her. She would continue to do her best, just as she always had. The next few days felt like a turning point for Sarah. She had come to a place where she was learning to quiet the self-doubt, to ignore the whispers that followed her around. Every day, she reminded herself that her worth wasn't tied to the way others saw her or to the judgment they passed. She was doing her best, and that was enough. But some days, it still felt hard. It felt like no matter how hard she tried, the weight of the world was always on her shoulders, pressing her down. When she walked down the street, she sometimes felt like people were looking at her with pity or, worse, judgment. The incident at the store kept replaying in her mind, and even though she tried not to think about it, it was always there, lingering in the background. One afternoon, after picking up Sam from daycare, Sarah decided to stop by the park. It had been a rough week at work, and Sam had been asking for a trip to the park for days. She smiled at the thought of him running around, his laughter filling the air. It was a small moment of peace in a life that often felt chaotic. She could give him that. As they arrived, Sarah found a quiet bench to sit on while Sam ran off to play with some other children. It was a bright, sunny day, and there was a gentle breeze in the air. For a moment, Sarah let herself relax, watching Sam chase after a soccer ball with the other kids. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun soak into her skin, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She heard footsteps approaching, and when she opened her eyes, she saw an older woman sitting down on the bench next to her. Sarah smiled politely, not thinking much of it. The woman, with her gray hair and kind eyes, gave her a warm smile in return. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" the woman said, her voice gentle. "It is," Sarah replied, her voice soft. "My son loves coming here." The woman nodded, her gaze following Sam as he kicked the ball toward another child. "It's so nice to see kids playing. They grow up so fast, don't they?" Sarah laughed quietly. "Tell me about it." "Sometimes, I wish I could slow time down." The woman smiled again, her eyes twinkling with understanding. "I know what you mean. I have a granddaughter, and I swear, one day she's a baby, and the next, she's already off to school." They chatted for a few more minutes, talking about the park and the changing seasons. Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her, a feeling of connection with this stranger who had no reason to be anything but kind. But then, as if sensing Sarah's quiet sadness, the woman's expression softened. "You know," the woman said, "I couldn't help but notice you the other day when you were in the store." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to look away, to pretend she hadn't heard, but the woman's voice was calm, not judgmental. I saw you with your son, the woman continued. And I saw you pay with coins. I just want to say that it didn't matter to me. You're doing your best. That's what matters. Sarah blinked, taken aback by the woman's words. She hadn't expected this. It wasn't often that someone said something kind to her, especially after what had happened in the store. Her throat tightened as she fought to hold back the tears. Thank you, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been struggling with that. It feels like no one sees the effort, you know. The woman nodded, her expression gentle. I see it. I can tell you love your son. That's what matters more than anything. It's hard sometimes, I know. But you're doing a great job. Don't let anyone make you feel less than that. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know this woman, and yet, her words felt like a lifeline. They were the words Sarah needed to hear, the words she had been longing for but never expected to find. She didn't feel so alone in that moment. Thank you, Sarah repeated, her eyes shining with gratitude. I needed to hear that more than you know. The woman smiled warmly, her eyes kind. I'm glad I could help. Sometimes, we all need a little reminder that we're enough. And you are. The two of them sat there for a while longer, watching Sam play with the other kids, laughing and running around like the carefree child he was. Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in days. It wasn't a solution to all her problems, but it was something. It was a reminder that kindness still existed in the world, and that there were people who saw her efforts, even when others didn't. When it was time to leave, Sarah stood up from the bench, Sam running over to her with a huge grin on his face. He reached up for her hand, and she took it, feeling the weight of the world a little less heavy. Say thank you to the nice lady, Sam, Sarah said, looking over at the woman who had just given her the gift of kindness. Sam smiled shyly and waved. Thank you. The woman waved back, her smile still warm. You're very welcome, young man. As Sarah and Sam walked away from the park, Sarah felt a lightness in her heart. The words of the kind woman lingered in her mind, giving her strength to face whatever came next. It wasn't always going to be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a while, she felt like maybe she wasn't as alone as she had thought. She looked down at Sam, his small hand tightly holding hers. Let's go home, buddy, she said, feeling a sense of hope that had been missing for so long. As they walked back to their apartment, Sarah realized that the world wasn't always full of judgment and shame. Sometimes, there were small moments of kindness that made it all worth it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days after her conversation with the kind woman in the park felt different for Sarah. Something had shifted inside her, a small, quiet spark of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't a miracle, and it didn't solve all her problems, but it was enough to remind her that she wasn't alone, that kindness still existed in the world. For the first time in weeks, Sarah allowed herself to feel something other than fear and doubt. She was still exhausted, still struggling, but there was a quiet strength growing inside her. Every day, she reminded herself that she didn't need anyone's approval. She was doing the best she could for Sam, and that was enough. No amount of judgment could change that. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to keep going. The next time Sarah went to the store, she felt different. The anxiety that had gripped her during her last visit was gone. She didn't care about the whispers or the stares. She didn't care if someone looked at her like she didn't belong. She had Sam by her side, and that was all that mattered. As they walked through the store, Sarah felt a new sense of purpose. She picked up the items they needed: bread, eggs, some fruit, and smiled at the cashier when it was time to check out. She didn't feel the need to hide the small bag of coins she had in her purse. This time, when the cashier looked at her, Sarah met her gaze without flinching. She was not ashamed. The line behind her was longer than it had been the last time, but Sarah didn't care. She counted out the coins slowly, calmly, as if she had all the time in the world. Sam was standing beside her, holding onto her leg, his little face full of curiosity. As she handed over the last coin, the cashier smiled at her, a small, genuine smile. "You're all set," the cashier said, handing her the receipt. Sarah smiled back, feeling a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't felt before. It wasn't about the coins. It was about reclaiming her confidence, standing tall in the face of judgment. She had nothing to prove to anyone. She was enough. As they walked out of the store, Sarah looked down at Sam, who was still holding her hand tightly. His smile was wide and carefree, and for a moment, she felt like she was doing something right. She was doing it for him. Everything she had done, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, had been for him. "Let's go home, buddy," Sarah said, her voice full of warmth. Sam nodded, his little feet running ahead of her as he skipped down the sidewalk. Sarah watched him with a sense of pride in her heart. It didn't matter what anyone thought. It didn't matter what the world said. She was a mother, and that was all that mattered. The next few weeks flew by. Sarah found herself facing the same challenges: tight budgets, long days at work, and the constant balancing act of being both a mother and a provider. But now, she didn't let the weight of it all get to her the way she once had. She had learned that it was okay to be imperfect. It was okay to struggle. As long as she had Sam, she had everything she needed. One evening, as Sarah sat at the kitchen table with Sam, they shared a simple dinner together. There were no fancy meals, no extra treats, but there was love. There was always love. "Mom," Sam said suddenly, looking up from his plate, "are we rich?" Sarah paused, surprised by the question. "No, sweetheart," she replied softly. "We're not rich. But we have everything we need. We have each other." Sam's face lit up with a big smile. "That's what I thought. We're rich in love." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion at his words. Rich in love. Maybe that was all they needed. Maybe, in the end, that was enough. After dinner, Sarah and Sam cleaned up the kitchen together, laughing as they worked. Sarah felt a warmth inside her, a contentment that had been missing for so long. It wasn't about money or status. It wasn't about impressing anyone or living up to anyone's expectations. It was about the moments they shared, the small, everyday moments that made life beautiful. That night, as Sarah tucked Sam into bed, she kissed him goodnight and whispered, "I love you more than anything, sweetie. You make everything better." Sam hugged her tightly, his little arms wrapped around her neck. "I love you too, Mom. You're the best." Sarah held him for a moment longer, feeling the weight of his love and trust. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more difficult days, but for now, in this moment, she felt a peace that had been missing for so long. She was enough. She was doing enough. As she left Sam's room and closed the door quietly behind her, Sarah stood for a moment in the hallway, letting the silence fill the space. The weight of the world didn't feel as heavy anymore. She had her son. She had her strength. She had everything she needed. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah believed it. She was enough. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Sarah woke up to the sound of Sam's laughter echoing through the apartment. The joy in his voice was contagious, and Sarah couldn't help but smile as she opened her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. The heavy weight of doubt, the constant worry, the feeling of not being enough, it was all fading away. She was starting to believe in herself again. She stretched and stood up, walking to Sam's room where he was jumping around on his bed, his little arms spread wide like wings. "Mom! I'm flying," he shouted, laughing as he bounced up and down. Sarah chuckled, leaning against the door frame. "You're going to fly right out the window if you're not careful." Sam stopped and looked at her, his eyes full of excitement. "Can we go to the park today?" Sarah thought for a moment. The park had always been a safe place for them, a place where they could forget the world for a while and just enjoy each other's company. She smiled. "Yes, buddy. We'll go to the park. Just let me get ready, okay?" As Sam rushed to get dressed, Sarah took a deep breath. She was still nervous, of course. Every day felt like a balancing act, and the road ahead was uncertain. But today, she didn't feel weighed down by the world. She felt strong. It wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about being there for Sam, loving him, and showing him that no matter what, they could face anything together. They spent the afternoon at the park, laughing and playing. Sam ran around with other kids, kicking a soccer ball and making new friends. Sarah sat on a bench nearby, watching him with pride. She felt a sense of gratitude for this moment, for the simple joys that made life worthwhile. She didn't need anything more than this. She had Sam, and that was all she needed. As the sun began to set, Sarah and Sam walked home hand in hand. Sam talked excitedly about the new friends he had made and how much fun he had at the park. Sarah listened, her heart full. For so long, she had been focused on what she didn't have: money, security, the approval of others. But now, she realized that the things that truly mattered weren't the ones she had been chasing. They were the moments of joy, the small acts of kindness, the love that she shared with her son. These were the things that made life rich, not the things that could be bought. When they arrived home, Sarah made dinner, and they ate together at the small kitchen table. It wasn't a fancy meal, but it was enough. As Sam talked about his day, Sarah felt a warmth in her heart. She was doing it. She was making a life for them, one small step at a time. And even though the world had its way of judging and making her feel small, she had learned to see herself differently. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving in her own way. Later that evening, as they cleaned up the kitchen together, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from her mom, something she hadn't received in weeks. It read, "I'm proud of you. I know things haven't been easy, but you've done an amazing job. I love you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. It had been a long time since she had heard those words. She had always carried the weight of feeling like she wasn't enough, like she hadn't made her family proud. But now, with Sam by her side and her mother's words in her heart, she realized that she had nothing to prove to anyone. She was enough just as she was. She hugged Sam tightly before putting him to bed. "I love you, sweetie," she whispered, brushing his hair from his face. "I love you too, Mom," Sam mumbled sleepily, snuggling into his blanket. Sarah smiled and kissed him goodnight. As she walked out of his room and into the quiet apartment, she stopped for a moment to look around. This was her life. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And she was proud of it. That night, as Sarah sat in the living room with a cup of tea, she reflected on everything that had brought her to this moment. The struggles, the fears, the doubts, they were all still there, but they didn't control her anymore. She had learned to face them, to rise above them, and to keep going. Every day, she was proving to herself that she was enough. The next day, as she walked to work, Sarah noticed something she hadn't seen before: the world didn't seem so heavy anymore. She wasn't looking over her shoulder, worrying about what people thought of her. She wasn't weighed down by the shame or the judgment. She was free. She was free because she had finally learned to believe in herself, to trust that she was doing the best she could, and to know that she was enough. And as long as she had Sam by her side, that was all that mattered. As Sarah entered the office that day, she held her head high. For the first time in a long time, she felt confident in who she was. She didn't need to be anyone else. She didn't need to live up to anyone's expectations. She just needed to keep being the best mom she could be, and that was enough. And as the day went on, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning. There would still be challenges, but now, she had the strength to face them. With Sam by her side and the love in her heart, she could do anything.